Rebel's Edge. We have not one, not two, but three bits of unusual activity that might have made you rich if you were listening to either this show or 3 at 3. So stay tuned for the Rebel's Edge. Bang!
Bang. Live indeed. Super Bowl, John. Super Bowl. We are finally almost here. I mean, it feels like forever during the Super Bowl week or 2 weeks that you have to sit out, but we're almost there, John. We'll be talking a little bit about that and some of the costs maybe involved and some of the things going on.
Yeah. And you'd think the Super Bowl was being played in Hawaii instead of Vegas with both of us in our Aloha shirts, Pete.
Yeah.
Aloha!
I think inflation has been hitting the Super Bowl pretty good, John, from things that I'm seeing right now.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the final Rebel's Edge of the week, folks. We always do it Monday through Thursday. Friday, we travel. And I'm not going to the Super Bowl this year. I don't know if Pete's thinking about it.
Nope.
But I'm happy to be watching from the best seat in the house, Pete. Because it's awfully nice to sit there in front of your whatever size television and watch it there, drink beer, margaritas, whatever, and enjoy that rather than fighting your way into a stadium, having a clear bag because you can't bring anything other than, a bag that's this big and it has to be clear and you got to put your phone in it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what a pain in the butt. It's not just the Super Bowl. That's a lot of sporting events now, but certainly football really went crazy with that, Pete.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. I mean, I know there are super fans out there, and you got to love them because they're the ones who do all the paying for all this kind of thing. But I guess we're paying as well because we're watching TV, and that TV money that the NFL gets is pretty damn good. So I think we're supporting them either way. But yeah, I'd rather be sitting here on the couch watching and be able to get and use the restroom if I need to, or go grab another cocktail. I mean, what the hell? That sounds pretty good.
I agree. Well, let's get started with the macro minute, Pete. And I know we're going to get to it in the Fantastic Futures segment, but it's like inflation doesn't think it's dead yet, Pete. It's coming back to life like The Walking Dead. Because the cost of moving stuff around the world is just going up. The cost of you moving yourself around, if you drive a car or a truck, is going up. And I don't care if it's a Tesla. If it's an EV, the prices are going up because electricity prices are going up. So I'm going to say the macro today, Pete, is inflation ain't dead.
Well, you're totally right, John. I think the other side of macro would be this. There have been some unbelievable earnings in this earnings season. And I know we talk about it all the time, but I think when you really look at it, why are we sitting with the S&P and everybody staring at it at 5,000, John? And that's all they could do yesterday is talk. Look, it's just a number. There is no absolute importance to that number, but of course, a lot of the stations love to get into that whole thing, and it's kind of crazy, but it is an area, a yardstick that people are looking at. I will say this, the markets have been extraordinary. Most of the earnings that we have seen have been absolutely outrageous, and it just keeps on going. And it's not just 7 stocks. There's a lot of stocks that are contributing to this run.
Yeah, as you said the other day, Pete, take a look at Caterpillar. Moved from 220 to 360.
Yeah.
In 3 months. That kind of sounds like it might have outperformed some of those magnificent 7, Pete. So if you just focused on those 7 stocks, you're really missing out. Sort of like if you don't watch Rebel's Edge every day, you're really missing out. Yeah. Let's talk about Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Futures.
As I said at the top, Pete, it's getting more and more expensive to fill up your car. It doesn't matter if it's a diesel and you've got a truck that runs on diesel or a car that primarily runs on gasoline or electricity. Prices are going up. There's a chart of crude oil this week. That's this week, folks, moving up from basically 71 and change all the way pushing towards 76 right now, Pete.
And if you flip that chart, John, you'd be looking at Nat Gas because it's down again. It's down 2.75% today. It's underneath $2 today. I mean, it's just getting absolutely hammered. But that's the negative side of me, I guess, for today. I'm going to give you a positive side. Well, depending on how you look at things, I guess. But cocoa. Look at the cocoa futures, John, up 125% in the last year. Now, that's not part of the Magnificent Seven either, last I checked anyway, but hell of a move to the upside that we're seeing there. And here's two of the reasons why. Obviously, it's chocolate, right? You've got that side of it and all those types of things. But on the other side of it that a lot of people probably don't recognize is there's a lot more happening in the medical world than meets the eye. And a lot of that actually comes from cocoa. So the demands are there. There is the limitations are also there right now, and that's why you're seeing that absolutely move from the bottom left to the upper right in a hurry, and continues to do so day after day after day.
Yeah, certainly it has been doing exactly that, Pete. And I'll point out that it's Valentine's Day, Wednesday next week, guys. So, and I look around because it is guys that I'm reminding of that. I think almost every woman on the planet, call me a whatever, but almost every woman on the planet knows it's Valentine's Day. And if you forgot, folks, you're not going to be a happy camper on the 14th or the 15th or the 16th or the 17th.
Or the 18th, the 19th, the 20th. Don't forget that one.
And here's a little tip from your Uncle John or Dr. John. There's a 40% off sale right now at Godiva. So go over to Godiva.com, and they're not paying us to say that, but Godiva, Godiva.com, 40% off and free shipping over $45. I don't know how I know that, Pete. All right, let's dive into PayPal because PayPal came out with earnings. They beat on estimates, but guidance was conservative. Now, we talk a lot about people lowering guidance expectations so that they can step over the bar instead of jump and hurdle over it. In this case, people thought they were too conservative. And you know what, Pete? We had unusual put activity, which means that people were buying puts ahead of these earnings. There it is on the screen. So they were buying the 65 puts with the stock at 66.58. Well, how much are those worth, Pete, with the stock at $56? Almost $9.
Not so bad.
Yeah, that dog will hunt. And if you want, remember, folks, it's not an option to trade just stock anymore. It's not an option is our website to claim this free book. So if you need to learn more about trading options instead of just buying stock, that's where you go. It's not an option.com.
Yep. It is interesting, John. You talked about it. I mean, the disappointment in guidance is, we talk about it every time we get into earnings season. That's always the critical moment. What does the guidance look like? How is it and why? And then you've got Wedbush out there talking about the problem right now is their execution. And so there's a little bit of a tug of war going on there because that particular analyst actually has held on to his outperform as well, just kind of hanging on. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed, John, because I've been watching PayPal for a really long time. There was a time in my career years ago where I was trading it mostly to the upside. I think they were doing just about everything right. Unfortunately, like this gentleman was talking about, though, that's when they started to get into this execution problem that they've got. Now, when you look at some of the numbers there, some of the numbers actually look pretty good. Their free cash flow is really off the charts. It's almost $4.5 billion. But they've got competition, and that's a big problem, especially when their primary competition might be Apple. And if that's the case, and we kind of know that it is, but if that's the case, they're going now against the big dog, and I think the big dog is winning this one. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to even step anywhere close to PayPal in the near future. It's something that they've got to show us. They've got to tell us that the CEO actually now, the new CEO, is got this thing turned and it's going in the right direction. And that's part of that execution that was being talked about that they weren't really doing very well with. Well, they're going to have to do well if they want to go up against the big boys like Apple.
Yeah, and think of that, folks. When Pete and I are asked all the time, well, what about Apple and the fact that until this year, Samsung sold more handsets? So what, Tim Seymour? Nobody cares. They don't make money on that hardly. and they certainly don't get reoccurring revenue, which I explained to Mr. Seymour Pete multiple times. And you look at services, you look at health, you look at the cloud, Pete, and then you look at Apple Pay. Let me see, does Samsung really make a lot of money from their Samsung Pay, Pete? I don't think so. So, I mean, the Wedbush analyst cited what Apple has done to Venmo and PayPal, and I think that's worth noting for you folks. Yep. All right, next one, Pete, Disney, DIS. So Mr. Iger proved once again what I have said for a long time, and that is that he's a poser. Pete, what did he do here? Did he go out and make Marvel better or Star Wars better or Pixar better and stop making woke crap that people don't want? No. Instead, he's going to slash $7.5 billion off of their spend. Oh, that's really creative. No, it's not. Michael Iger is a poser, Pete. He is not the guy that should be running this thing. And that's why Peltz is unhappy too. Now, this particular quarter, because they cut a whole bunch of expenses, yeah, they're going to beat estimates and so forth. But the only real things that I thought they did, Pete, were the Epic Games investment. Okay, but again, he's buying somebody else's ingenuity, somebody else, Fortnite and all that stuff. And he's buying Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, the movie she made about that. That's what he's doing. Does that sound like he's real creative? Or that he's put people in charge that are real creative? Not to me.
No, I think you're right, John. I think it's something where it's almost just management in some way. There is no search for the growth. It's about management. Now, you could say, well, but as you just mentioned, well, you bought this gaming and well, you've got this thing with Taylor Swift. At some point, is it going to dry up a little bit on the Taylor Swift side of things? I don't know. I mean, it's been extended, continues to extend the relationship with Kelsey and everything else. And so maybe this Eras Tour thing, John, maybe they can make some money on that. But let's think about this. What did they have to pay? I mean, I would say that number is a pretty healthy number. So when you look at all of that, and you were talking about Nelson Peltz, I'll guarantee you this. He is hovering around, John, and he's probably frustrated because he's been an activist who's been after this thing for a while. And at some point, I think he's going to be able to get his way. It won't happen for the next couple of quarters probably, but it isn't that far away. And I'll tell you, I think right now Iger is just kind of gambling and trying to go big in this way. But the growth, I don't know that I see the growth necessarily, John. And I think that's going to be a problem, especially as you said, with all these cuts and everything else that he's done to try to change things up. It's just not the creative side of Disney that Disney is something we've been talking about forever and 20, 40, 50 years for some of us. But it's the creativity of Disney that is the magic, and the magic doesn't seem to be there right now.
Yeah, it seems like that hat is empty. He hasn't found a rabbit to pull out of it for a while, Pete. All right, let's talk for a second, Pete, about what else is moving in the markets today, and that is ARM Holdings. This one, of course, came with a direct list not too long ago. Fabulous jump the very first day of trading. Went from like the 50s all the way up to 70 or so. And then it was a volatile little sucker for a couple weeks as people kind of felt their way around it. But then they came out today with some blowout earnings up 24%, Pete, beating expectations for Q3. That's a phenomenal jump. And you know what? Another one where we had unusual activity. So if I had DJ Khaled, I'd have him saying another one, because this one is also one of those where it's not an option comes into play. If you knew about options trading, folks, you would have been buying that unusual activity when we cited it, and you would have been cashing out big today. So Keep in mind, it's not an option. ARM Holdings, $2.30 for those 100 calls. I guess those went about $21 in the money or so today, Pete. That's a 10X, folks.
Yeah, that one was unbelievable. Actually, they hit $26 or more than that, John, today. Jeez. So pretty outstanding. And as you said, I mean, that is the leverage that you do get from the options world, and that provides that opportunity that you're talking about there. their projections going forward on earnings, they're crushing it. On revenue, they're also crushing it. So when you look at what this company is able to do, is this move outrageous? Yeah, it probably is a bit outrageous, but we also thought the moves from NVIDIA were pretty crazy. We've thought the moves from AMD and some of the other names out there are crazy. And to some degree, they are. But they're building into something. And this whole industry, John, the one thing that bothers me maybe a little bit with ARM, but it's still early, relatively speaking, is it's trading at about a 58 PE. And then you look over at some of the other names that are out there and you start looking at something that might look a little bit more favorable, at least for the moment. But maybe in the further out future, this thing actually, I think, has an unbelievable trajectory going forward. That all being said, I'll tell you who's the real winner here. SoftBank. They only own 90% of the outstanding shares, John. So I think SoftBank's having a pretty decent day today as well.
Yeah, I'd say they are indeed. What a great trade that one was. All right, let's take a look at Oscar, because just a couple weeks ago, Pete, you and I were talking about Humana, a health insurer that was having a real hard time because of Medicare Advantage and Medicaid Advantage and all that stuff, because their prices were going up and they couldn't keep up with it. More and more people were coming in and putting stress on Humana, and the stock fell out of bed. Well, take a look at Oscar. They're also a pioneering health insurance company, and they put up some pretty phenomenal numbers. Now, it's a much smaller company, Pete, but you know what? They were buying a lot of upside calls with the stock at $11. Another unusual activity, and another reason that Pete and I are saying, you know what? It's not an option. Right. It's not an option to not trade options, folks. When you look at the kinds of returns you can get from trading options, how you define your risk when you enter the trade, and how you get a leveraged return, just those two reasons alone, Pete. But it's a great way to diversify. That's why we say it's not an option.
And the derivatives world is on fire, John. You and I were talking right before the show. 50 million contracts yesterday. We've been averaging just under 50 million, closer to like, call it 47, 48 million contracts a day. And if you just go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you're going to see every single year it goes up, 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 up. 2019, 19 million contracts were trading a day. Last year we traded, I think it was 46.5 million contracts a day. So the leverage that you're talking about and all the different things that you're talking about, you know exactly what your risks are. This is a company, though, with Oscar, real quick, where they've cut a lot of the losses. They did a really an outstanding job. They crushed it. And you brought up Humana, and I think that was a good one. United Health is another one where those guys struggle. They really had a tough time, but it looks like Oscar figured out something very, very well. They did a great job with that. They got a great balance sheet. The only thing that has me a little bit concerned, and this is a stock that made a heck of a move today, up above $17 a share. I look at the burn rate of cash. Whew, that's a big number, John. So that would be the one thing where I'd say if you're looking at it from a fundamental side, that would be something that would be a little bit concerning. So do I think this thing continues this run to the upside? Certainly could. But at some point in time, that burn rate is going to be something that becomes a bigger factor. So just at least have that in the back of your mind when you're looking at a name like this one, specifically Oscar.
Yeah, absolutely. And always a good idea to you can listen to us, folks, and you can get excited about trades like the ones we've described in Oscar or PayPal or ARM Holdings today. But before you trade anything like that, the only investment advice that I can give you is make sure you understand the risks and make sure that you have paper traded or done some sort of experimentation rather than putting your hard-earned capital on the line without really truly understanding what the risks are. Yeah. Pete and I don't give investment advice except that. Make sure you understand the risks, not just the rewards for making any trade. All right, Pete, let's get started with the Red Zone Sports. But as we get started, let's go back to our old friend, Frank here, who has done a great job once again describing something in sports for us. You know, sometimes it's, did you know that this guy has more rushing yards than Walter Payton or whatever? In this case, he's talking about the Super Bowl. So let's give it a listen.
This is what you get when you spend $2.5 million on a suite at this year's Super Bowl.
$2.5 million.
So the cheapest ticket to Super Bowl 58 at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas this weekend is about $7,000, which is double the price of last year's game in Arizona. But that's
Inflation?
just the get-in.
Can I say
price.
inflation?
If you actually want a suite, that will cost you millions. Each luxury box allows only 20 people, so if you split it with your friends, it comes out to $125,000 a person. Not only do you get special seats to watch the game from a perfect view,
Special.
you also get an insane amount of food. Just take a look at what this creator named.
Let me tell you, for $2 million, John, I could give you a lot of food.
I could buy a lot of food for the 100,000. I could fill your box with food for the next year.
I might have to start charging guys to come into my house here for the game.
Frozen cheesecake,
Wagyu beef
and of
hot
course
dogs.
you get a bar. Now, is this actually worth over
great.
$100,000 a person? Probably not. Because you can buy
Probably
tickets at the 50-yard line downstairs for about a quarter of the price. Between this being a brand new $1.9
discount.
billion stadium and this being the first Super Bowl in Vegas ever, it has made this game more expensive than anything we've ever seen before.
Wow.
It's incredible, John. It's absolute. You know, every year we say that, though. Every year we say, well, at some point, this has got to stop. I mean, I remember, John, I go back far enough. I've been to a Super Bowl. I went with Dad long ago, our father, and he brought me out there. It was in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena playing the Raiders. Let me tell you something, John. I'll bet you those tickets, no way were they over $100. And we were primo seats. and now, you know, it's been a lot of years, but think about that. Now it's $7,000 is the lowest price. I mean, honestly.
Well, he wasn't quite right about that, Pete.
Okay,
if
good.
you got the lottery from Kansas City or San Francisco, if you're a season ticket holder and you're in the lottery, you could have got them as cheap as $2,000. Now, that wouldn't be the 50-yard line seats. I get it. But nonetheless, they were cheaper. Now, the first Super Bowl, the tickets were $10, which inflation adjusted is $90 in today's money. But still, to see them going for, say, somewhere between $7,000 on up, and that's not even the scalped great seats. That's just, what the scalpers are getting for like crappy seats, Pete. Again, I have no idea why people would pay that, but they're asking, the highest asking price for a single seat right now, Pete, is $45,000, according to what I saw online. By the way, I remember back in the day, Pete, I bought a package for a charity. I was at a charitable auction, and as usual, I was overserved at the charitable thing because that's what they're going to do. They're going to feed you adult beverages, right? So my wife bought it came with a private jet, limo, 6 seats to the Super Bowl, 2 nights in the Hyatt Regency, blah, blah, blah. It ended up being 2006 and the Bears made it. But I didn't know that when I bid for this thing, of course, that the Bears would make it, because who would bet on the Bears making it to the Super Bowl? They've only been to 2. But anyway, so what I did, Pete, was the guy called me up who had the private jet. He was with Pepsi. And he said, you know what, John, I really need the jet for the Super Bowl. And he said, can we work something out? And I said, oh, sure. And he said, you're so understanding. Thank you. He said, use it anytime you want. But he said, I really appreciate this, John. So I sold the tickets to the Super Bowl, sold the limo, sold the hotel room, sold the whole thing. And I used the jet.
Well, I'll tell you, it is amazing, though, John. The numbers are just freak show numbers. They really are. And speaking of freak show, let's jump to our Rebel Sports real quick.
Okay.
So it's Super Bowl time, right? And we all know that. And you were just discussing some of the costs. And by the way, I would sell right now. There's a seat on my couch right now for $10,000. My wife will give you a bowl of chili. I'll give you 2 beers, maybe 3. All that being said, but John, one thing that is happening as we've come to the end of the season outside of the Super Bowl itself is a lot of the players and some of the anger that they've got, they all want to play on grass, which sounds easy maybe, but it's not that easy because of the problems that you have to deal with trying to figure out, all right, well, a lot of these stadiums, they don't really give you the opportunity to be grass stadiums. They don't have those rollers that bring out the whole field and everything else. But Ironically, John, here's some of the numbers that they had out there. Turf, the injury rate has been actually consistent for the last decade. Meanwhile, grass has hit the highest injury rate that it has in the last 10 years. So it's kind of interesting when you see that going on, but it's still the injuries from grass. It's still a lower number though than it was for the artificial turf. So interesting stuff. There's only 13 stadiums that actually have natural grass, but I found it kind of interesting as we're going into the Super Bowl and everything else, and all the players. Now the guys who aren't in the Super Bowl all have commentary, and they're all going to the Super Bowl. As a player, you get 2 tickets. And the only thing the NFL asks you is do not sell those tickets. Let me tell you, I think some of them do. As a matter of fact, when I was playing there, I know of some of the guys who did. So it's kind of a nice payday, actually. But it should be pretty interesting. What do you think about this grass thing? Because there's a lot of players out there, John, that talk about turf, and they talk about, when you're running on turf, you stop, and that makes your joints not feel so great, and the burns that you get on your arms and everything else and anything that's exposed. So what do you think? Do you think the NFL will take them serious? Will they try to really work out getting them grass, or is this sort of just a pipe dream right now by the players?
It's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
Like you said, Pete, if the stadium, like Arizona last year, it was built for rolling the grass in for the game. But they rolled it in, and maybe they rolled it in too soon or something, Pete. As you recall, they were all falling on the grass last year. They had to change their cleats and everything because what they'd been practicing on wasn't the same once it was pulled into the stadium in Arizona. But this year, it's turf. Here's an advantage, San Francisco, Pete. It's turf from the same place that sells it to the San Francisco 49ers at Levi Stadium. And what they do is it was $2 million, Pete, but they shipped that grass to Las Vegas. It sits outside during the day, getting sun and everything, and then they roll it into the stadium for the game. Now, this is supposed to be much better than last year, and obviously, it's a good thing it wasn't out in California for the last couple of weeks, Pete, because they get pounded by rain and so forth. It might have washed away. I saw our buddy Grant Cardone's place in Malibu, Pete. There was like a river running by his house. So anyway, I think it'll be good grass this year, but yeah, not every stadium has that option is the bottom line.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I'll tell you, it's there's so much fun things that go along with the Super Bowl, and the players. I understand it totally, John. I think that grass does give you a little bit better opportunities, and supposedly the studies they've done gives you about 2 extra years in the NFL potentially. The best way they can figure it. Anyway, next I wanted to talk about something because both these 2 teams have 2 great tight ends, right? And it's a position that used to be just kind of who cares about the tight end? It's the wide receiver, right? It's the running back, right? Quarterback, right? But over the years, it's really become something more and more about tight ends, not just a tight end in the league type of thing. But what do you think? Where do you put Kelce, John, right now, Travis Kelce? Because a lot of people have him rated as the best tight end ever. A lot of people say that. Now, I'm not one of those, but I put him in the top 4 or 5. Here's my list. You've got Travis Kelce at number 4. And the reason I put him there, John, is I don't think he's a great blocker. I think he's a great catch guy. I think he does a good job. I think he does modestly okay blocking. But if you're a tight end, you got to block. You got to do all the things that go with it. And obviously, I think he does have the great hands. He knows how to move around on the field to get himself into open. Does a great job. Antonio Gates, do you remember him from the San Diego? They were back then the San Diego Chargers. That guy was a freak because he was big, fast, athletic. A lot of these guys, John, that are really good tight ends play basketball, by the way. And then there's Gronk. I put Gronk at number 2, kind of balancing back and forth whether or not I'd have him at number 1. Gronk would block, and he didn't mind blocking. He was big as a house. You can see him now. He's lost weight, and he's still bigger than anybody on that set when they're talking football. And I'll tell you, what he did in his career with Tom Brady was absolutely outstanding, and he did it with multiple other tight ends on the same team. So he really did stand out in that whole thing. I got Tony Gonzalez as my number 1. You and I both know him because he's a Cal guy. Played basketball at Cal. He could have played in the NBA. Went for football. That guy, athletically, size, speed, what he was able to do as a blocker and a catching tight end and everything, John, that guy was special. He had 100 touchdowns in his career. So I think the guy had a pretty damn good career. And he's a guy that people have forgotten about, though, because he was doing the media side of things. And then he kind of stepped away from that. And he's doing whatever he's doing. But great guy, great athlete, one of the best I've ever seen. And I put him up as the best tight end right now. And I'm excluding the guys from like the 70s. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I'm not going any further than like 1980. So what do you think? Is Kelce number one for you, though? I mean, outside of the fact that outside of his girlfriend?
Outside of his girlfriend, yeah. I'd say that he's a great tight end. Like you said, I think his real skill is a combination of very good hands, and he reads the defense, and he will find the open spot. He knows if the linebackers are dropping or if they're not, if they're in man coverage or if they're not, where there might be an opportunity to, if not have a pick, at least use one of the other players or referee even as a running interference for him. He's done that very well his whole career at Kansas City. I like Kittle as the more complete tight end of the two, Pete. Now, I'm not saying he's top 4 or 5 ever, but I am saying in the modern era, this is a guy that really blocks well. You and I ran a video of him a week ago or so of him taking down a big guy, and knocking him flat on his butt. And then the other guy said, "Man, I stepped on somebody's foot." And he said, "No, you didn't. That was all me." Kittle is a big kid, 6'4", 250, Pete. Madison, Wisconsin, played at Iowa, as you said. A lot of good tight ends like Laporta. There's great tight ends come out of Iowa. And I like him a lot. I'm not saying I take him over Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce doesn't have Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey wouldn't have the yards he has in San Francisco if Kittle wasn't as good as Kittle really is.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, John. I had Kittle at number 5, actually. And maybe that's not fair. It's hard. You never want to judge guys too much when you got a guy who's in the present day and a guy who was 40 years ago. It's just a different game and a lot of differences that go into that whole thing. But I think you're right. I think Kittle's a special player. Got to, meet him, talk to him. And I'll tell you, great guy. And you could see the sense of humor. That's why they mic'd that guy up, because he's funny. He's clever. He has a lot of fun on the field. He plays football the way it's meant to be played, I think, out there. And it's lots of fun. And it's not just because he's mic'd up that he does that. When he doesn't have a mic, he's still doing the same thing. Just watch him. You'll see, because he is a lot of fun. He's high up on my list, I think, and he's a great blocker. But I think sometimes, he's not quite as big and heavy as some of those other guys. Gronk is a big human being. You and I have stood next to the brothers. Those guys are all big. The Gronkowski brothers, they have almost a blueprint of each other of exactly what they look like. They're big, thick guys. And Kittle's a little bit more lean, and he kind of has a little bit of that tweener thing where he's got that wide receiver sort of body, but he's big enough to be a tight end. And he's a pretty special guy for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know how Wisconsin let him go, Pete. The kid's from Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, that's the that's the Badgers. I don't know how Iowa out-recruited him to go down to Iowa and play on a farm field versus playing, in Camp Randall Stadium, but they did. And
it's tight end U, John. It's tight end U. Iowa is tight end U. You look at all the tight ends in the NFL right now, you're going to see Iowa next to some of the very best ones in the NFL. I don't know what they're doing down there. Whatever they're doing it right.
Well, we appreciate you guys joining. Please share your appreciation of Rebel Edge with your friends. We're going to be spreading the word on a bunch of new platforms in the very near future. We appreciate all of you joining us. Pete and I don't do the show on Fridays. We travel on Fridays. So we'll be back Monday to give you a wrap-up for the Super Bowl and what went on. And I'll let you know whether I'm crying in my beer or whether the 49ers really did bring it home for me. We'll see you Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Enjoy the Super Bowl.